Hello and welcome back. I'm Michael Stamatinos, your host of the Advancing Healthcare Innovation Show. And if you're new to us, we're super pumped to have you here. We happen to be really passionate about healthcare, innovation, adoption, access to care, and leadership. And if this is your first time tuning in, let me just tell you a little bit about what we do here. So we're a healthcare innovation focused company. We're bringing stories of innovation within healthcare to life. And our aim is just highlighting real people that are truly innovating within our space and giving them a platform to be able to share their stories with the world, with our community. We've got just an amazing action-packed year with a lot of incredible new content, some fantastic interviews that are coming up. And if you haven't checked out any of the previous interviews, just make sure you go and do that. So hit subscribe now so you can get all the new interviews coming up. And in today's conversation, I'm very, very excited to have Emily Klingbeil, who's the founder and CEO of Phoebe, joining us. And Emily's journey is actually really interesting. It's a testament to the power of combining passion, purpose, and personal experience. She's an HBS alum that's got over a decade of investment banking experience, and Emily's seen some serious success in her career. However, it was becoming a mom that really truly transformed her perspective. And Phoebe, we'll go into this a little bit later, is a digital platform that creates supportive, authentic community for new moms and parents that help them navigate the challenge and the joys of becoming a parent. And we're going to dive into Emily's personal journey and her experiences as a mom and how those have shaped her vision for Phoebe. So, Emily, welcome to the show.
Hi, Michael. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So let's dig in a little bit into your history. Sometimes when you want to look into the future, you kind of have to peer into the past a little bit. So maybe we spend a couple of minutes here just sharing a little bit more of your story, sort of and the genesis of Phoebe. So talk a little bit about sort of your pre-Phoebe life and what that was like.
Well, you mentioned the over a decade of investment banking, but I definitely think the genesis for Phoebe and maybe my beliefs about the world in general probably were formed obviously much earlier than in investment banking. And I grew up in the Midwest in Minnesota. I grew up on a dairy farm in the 1980s that eventually turned into a tomato farm. I helped my dad build a tomato farm at the age of 12 and lived on a tomato farm until I went into banking. And so I do think that's relevant because I think growing up as a farmer and growing up building businesses, which is what farmers do, you're connected to the land, very connected to reality, connected to family, because I worked with my dad and with my siblings. That was our life. And when I transitioned from that life into banking, it was a very sort of shocking reality, a shocking new world, moving from Midwest Minnesota to New York City. And in New York City, I found different types of stresses, right? I was still working hard, but maybe I was working until 3 a.m. There were, it was more political, more challenges dealing with, humans and climbing the corporate ladder versus dealing with nature. But I sort of credit that, if I think back to sort of why Phoebe in a way, because, as I became a mother in investment banking and kind of had this image of this trajectory of my life that I think a lot of women and men have, especially young people, right? We imagine that we're going to be extremely successful. We're going to, go to a great college. We're going to graduate. We're going to have this incredible experience of almost a linear trajectory after that. And, when I got pregnant with my first child, I was 31 years old. I was an associate in equity research at Credit Suisse in New York. And suddenly, within about 5 weeks, I was vomiting 10 times a day. And just getting up and going to work was a challenge. Sometimes before I would get to work, I already would have vomited 3 times. I wouldn't feel put together. I certainly didn't feel like I was projecting the image of an investment banker. And fast forward, during all of my pregnancies, both my son and my daughter, I experienced a lot of health challenges. I had hyperemesis with my son. Later in my pregnancy with my daughter, I had a pulmonary infarction. And I just experienced this tremendous disconnect between who I was trying to project to be and the image and the success that I wanted to have in my career, and the inability to do that for a period of time with all of the health challenges I was having in pregnancy.
Yeah.
And couple that with the fact that our healthcare system is not really designed to embrace and support that big life change. They're certainly designed to help keep you alive, and they're certainly designed to make sure that the baby comes out alive. But there was no place to go that could really help me solve all of the different health problems I was going through, that couldn't help me develop a mindset of resilience, and they couldn't help me really navigate, okay, this is who I am now, but I see the future, and this is how we can help you progress. And when I looked around my floor, in Madison Square Park, Credit Suisse, there were no mothers. 170 people on the floor, and there was one mother who was an MD and had nannies, lots of nannies, and a stay-at-home husband. And so, I realized that pregnancy, becoming a mother, is a massive life change. We don't have enough role models in senior positions of power at the companies we work at. We don't have a health system that's designed to support us holistically. And that's really where the vision developed for Phoebe, which was, let's get together and create a place that fills in those gaps and does that.
Incredible. Why don't you think people stumbled upon this reality sooner? I mean, you're not the only one that has gone through becoming a parent, and yet it seems like it's this hidden problem. Where do you think that comes into play, that is sort of often overlooked? What are some of those factors? I mean, you came in from an industry that I think is notorious for how people work, but there are other industries. I mean, within healthcare, the number of nurses that go back to working post having a child, statistically, I mean, less than half go back. I mean, it's a big issue.
I definitely don't have all the answers to that
Yeah.
question. I have some thoughts. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, we came out of, sort of the Industrial Revolution, and this problem has been talked about before, where, during the World Wars, women were sent to work.
Yeah.
And women experienced working out of the home and had an important role in society. And then when the men came back from the war, it was like, go back home, right? And that didn't work so well, right? Women needed to be part of the labor force, and they wanted to be, and the country needed it. And so, if you sort of look at I would say my mother's and certainly my grandmother's generation, there were a very small number of women, really, that weren't just nurses, and I don't mean just in a derogatory sense at all, but there were sort of three professions women typically did. It was nursing, it was education, and it was administrative work. And the women that sort of rose to the top, that became doctors or lawyers or had professions that generated significant earning opportunities for them, they were rare, and they knew that they wouldn't be able to have a balanced life, and they didn't expect it. They didn't expect to have support. That was the cultural context they grew up in, and they were sort of, I think of them as the warriors, the Moses,
Yeah.
of the women's movement. And I think we've sort of come full circle on that. And my generation grew up thinking we could have it all, rightly or wrongly. But that's what we thought. I'm the sort of the youngest Gen Xer, but we grew up thinking, no, I should be able to get a degree, be a mom, and succeed at work, without really understanding the implications of the fact that, our environment isn't actually supporting that. And so I think we've reached this point, this tipping point, in a way where women haven't advanced quite as much. Mothers haven't advanced quite as much as they should have, because the supports are not there.
So where do you think the opportunity lies on the employer side? Where do you think their opportunity is to make this shift happen? What are some of the big things that you think they need to actually realize that is going on in order for a solution like Phoebe to really not only just take precedence, but really become the norm?
Yeah, I think that there are different buckets of employers that sort of,
Yeah.
there are employers that are very forward thinking and are really investing in families and investing in childcare supports and are creating a culture that is very positive for women and mothers and people going through pregnancy and major life change. But then there's a whole other large swath of companies that are sort of checking the box, right? Like maybe, they'll sign up for a large scale solution that applies to everybody, but doesn't really deliver very much, but it sort of checks the box. And so I think you're going to find that the successful companies are moving more and more towards the cultural shift and providing
Hmm.
solutions that actually lift up families. And I think women more and more will seek out those employers because when we see it at Phoebe, the women that are in their early 30s having children, they want to be successful, but they want to be in places that can support that. And companies that aren't doing that will lose out. They will leave. They absolutely will leave. And we're seeing it. We're helping Phoebe. One of our big overarching goals is to help working moms stay and to help high achieving, highly educated women reach higher levels, corporate boards, the C-suite, and that we're supporting that. But there's a lot of strain there.
Mm.
And there's a lot of strain that we're seeing in families. And so I think we're a little bit of a Trojan horse, right? We go into a company, we support you, but then we also want to help impact your culture. So more men are connected to women, are connected to the challenges that families are going through, and are more empathic and more desiring to support better outcomes. But
So let's talk about the micro communities that you're building, because I think that's sort of a very interesting point that you brought up. So you mentioned about the process of going through becoming a mom, then becoming a mom, and then after you've becoming a mom, kind of integrating back into the workforce. Can you talk a little bit about sort of how Phoebe has approached sort of those three buckets and style of interventions that you have been able to really sort of do and doing it at I'll just say at scale?
yeah, when we designed, I mean, we definitely had some big decisions to make up front when we designed Phoebe. And one of them was, do we want to just sort of focus on a silo and create a tool that does that thing very well? And so what I mean by that is, lactation is challenging for almost 80% of new mothers. Breastfeeding is challenging. Do we want to just provide a tool that improves that? And we sort of made the decision that no, we don't, because a lot of those tools are out there and they have been out there for many, many years.
Right.
And what isn't helping or what isn't working well is the fact that this is, a multi-dimensional life change that needs a multi-dimensional solution. And it needs a solution that can adapt. And so you mentioned the three stages. The first stage is sort of, I'm trying to have a baby, pregnancy, surrogacy, adoption, whatever that is. I'm trying to get a baby, or I'm pregnant before the baby comes. And the solutions there, well, we are forming communities. The biggest solution we're offering there feels more like an advisory board. And so we're giving you
Mm.
evidence-based content. You have somebody that you can call at any time. And our goal is to meet you where you're at. Our goal is not to get you into community. Our goal is not to necessarily help you massively reintegrate yourself into the workforce at that stage, because you're not at that stage. And then when somebody is in postpartum and they have the new baby, it's much more about triage and getting you to experts. And so, okay, if your issue is lactation, we're going to help you. Okay, if your issue is you're not sleeping and you have a lot of anxiety, we're here to help you. And so the focus is much more about, meeting those immediate needs as they change. And then once somebody is getting ready to go back to the workforce, it's a whole sort of different solution set, right? Because
Hmm.
they've already gotten a lot of those immediate needs met. But now a lot of times it's more about the anxiety I feel, the meaning I give to it. How do I feel about my work environment? Setting myself up for success, and also, sort of integrating this new identity, which is a big thing for women. This is having a baby is a massive emotional, physical endeavor that changes you forever. And so we do a lot more community, small groups, education, mentorship when you're ready for it. We don't expect anybody, when I was working 70 hours a week in investment banking and I was pregnant, if somebody came up to me and said, let's join a group of 8 women and we're going to have a meaningful life experience, I would have said, no, absolutely not. I don't want anything to do with 8 other
Right.
pregnant women. It sounds horrible. I'm working, I'm successful, and so our goal isn't to do that. Our goal is to meet you where you're at and to know as you go through those stages, what's the right solution for you.
So can you maybe just to kind of make that a little bit more concrete, are there any stories, anything that you can draw upon without breaching any sort of privacy
Yeah.
as it relates to people going through their journey? Anything that you can that comes to mind that you can share?
Yeah, we have some fun. I mean, we have some funny stories. There was a couple, 2 lovely women, had a lot of fertility challenges, but finally, one of them was pregnant, and her partner signed up for Phoebe. And she didn't really want anything to do with Phoebe. And so her partner would just like, we would have sessions, preparing you for, what your partner can do in the birthing room to truly help ease your experience. And so the partner would put them on in the background, and her pregnant partner would be in the other room, and she didn't want anything to do with it, but she would be listening to it.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, maybe after 5 sessions, all of a sudden we sort of saw her head peek in, and she was like, hey, I've been listening. This isn't really my thing, but there's some good information here. And they had, eventually she gave birth, and the birth experience was quite traumatic. And we just kept reaching out and being in this beautiful family's life. And about 4 to 6 weeks postpartum, the birth doula and the postpartum doula that were supporting this couple felt quite strongly that the birth mother was developing postpartum depression. And
Okay.
we had developed a relationship with a partner at that point. She had a lot more trust in us, even though she was reluctant in the beginning, but we were able to support her in that acute phase of need. And within 3 months, she was well. And so it's a small
Amazing.
example, though, of we understand, like, nobody, our goal is to build trust. Our goal is to be an advisory board. Our goal is that you may not necessarily think this is what you need, but give us a chance and we will surprise you. We will support you in ways that are unexpected. And so that was just a case, again, of a family that didn't necessarily want what we were offering, but then became more part of it and benefited immensely from it. And to this day, they're beautiful 3-year-old, and they're living in Amsterdam and we're still in touch. And that's the other, I think, beautiful thing about Phoebe is that when people join, they might just be thinking, I'm going to get lactation support. Or,
Yeah.
what, if I need a sleep coach, they'll be there for me. And that is true. But more and more now we have families coming back, having their 2nd and 3rd baby and knowing that this is a place that they will be cared for. And so that to me is the biggest thing that we're offering, which is it's something that grows. It may not be something that immediately seems relevant, but over a period of time, it will become more relevant and you will see the benefit of what we're doing, which is different. It's not just about a point solution that solves a moment in time need. It is a place that wants to be there for you on this journey of new parenthood.
So at what point do they graduate from Phoebe? Is there ever a point, or can they continuously remain within the ecosystem of Phoebe?
Well, that is the vision. I mean, the vision of Phoebe is not that it's a place that you're connecting with every day,
Mm-hmm.
but it is a place almost like, anyone who had an incredible experience at a master's degree, like, I think back to my Harvard MBA experience. I still connect back there. It's still a part of my life. It may not be a part of my life every day, but
Right.
when I want to learn and grow and reconnect with alums, that's where I go. And I think that's what the vision for Phoebe is, that it be a place where as a woman, and now as we're growing as a parent, that you can come back to and go, this is a place where I can learn about myself, I can develop resilience, I can connect with people that care about this part of my life's journey, which is, this transformational thing, bringing life into the world and raising life. And it's so much
Yeah.
more important than, there's a million ways to raise a great child. but I can tell you that the number one, the most important thing is that the parents are resilient, the parents are open, the parents are able to cope with change. And
Mm,
if you work on yourself as a parent and your support as a parent, your kids are going to be okay. Too
yeah.
much focus on the details of parenting and not enough focus on the essence and the goodness of the parent, which is
Yeah,
the
I had a
model for the child.
mentor. I had a mentor tell me once that, if you're too busy learning the tricks of the trade, you may never end up learning the trade. And so things like that's what you're talking about here. When it comes to shifting gears just briefly, when it comes to like the innovation part of things and you being sort of a visionary, where, let's, how far out are you looking in terms of Phoebe? Where do you want to see this going to? What does it look like in the next six months, a year? How are you thinking about innovating through this interesting time that we're in right now?
Well, there's no doubt, Michael, it's been a really challenging economic environment, especially because our business model is B2B to C, and so we need employers to partner with us and be willing to do this. And I think employers are looking for sort of large scale solutions they can, massively integrate across all their cultures and all their employees. And I think that's really tough if you actually want impact, right? Because impact is cultural. Impact happens in community. Impact happens in safety. And so, I think our biggest challenge with Phoebe is really getting employers to see actually there need to be multiple solutions and they need to be niche and they need to meet people where they're at. And so I'm really focused on talking to a lot of employers and getting our message out there and making sure that we're delivering impact for the employers where we are right now and growing with
Mhm.
them. And so maybe that's a bit, of a micro vision, but that is a challenge that we have, no doubt, is to be able to, get employers to see the value of what we're doing and that the impact matters more than checking the box.
So there's, people talk about data and information and there's a lot out there. What type of data are you presenting? How are you telling the story? Because it seems as though that there's there's a lot of there's a lot of utilization of your solution. How do you present that information back to the employers that really ends up resonating with them? And if I was an employer, a prospective employer, I guess how would you present that to me and sort of get me over the hump in terms of thinking that this is something that we not just a nice to have, but rather it's a must have.
I think that there's a lot of data out there, but a lot of cases are very hard to prove. Meaning, if I say at Phoebe we're reducing C-section rates, there are many factors that are involved in
Mm.
that. And so we
Yes.
have been focusing less on the medical part, in part because we are not in the hospital with people. We are not the doctor making those decisions. And we have made this strategic choice to focus more on, what are retention rates for everybody who's gone through Phoebe. And
Mm.
so if you're an employer and you've been with us for 3 years, we're looking at how many of those women did we support 3 years ago that are still with you today? And if they're not
Mhm.
with you, how did we help them leave but protect your brand equity? And so we're looking at retention numbers for the employer. We're looking at employer favorability metrics because if I'm an employer, I don't want everyone to stay with me, right? I want the employees that love my company, want to be here, and see a purpose in
Yeah.
being here, staying with me. And if they leave, I want them to think that employer treated me really well in a hard time in my life, and I will speak well of that employer.
Mm.
That's tremendous value for an employer. And so those are the metrics that we're focused on. And then the other is obviously the experience of our members, right? At the end of their experience, were we helpful to them? And so, no, we're not focused on C-section rates. We're not focused on, reducing medical costs per se, because it's a tough case for us to
Is
argue.
there, for some to prevent someone from leaving, let's just say pick a particular niche that you guys are in right now. What is the mathematical benefit to an employer of saving someone from actually leaving? From like a hard dollar saving standpoint.
Well, so we have been tracking our ROIs with the employers that we've been with for a long time. And on
Yeah.
any individual member, if we just increase their retention by 25%, their return is between 250 and 600%. And so we are
Wow.
not a cost center. We are an
Yeah.
investment in human capital at a inflection point in their lives where either you lose them or you can keep them for a long time. And for women that give birth, that is the moment. That is the moment, people. Right? Right? And it's not about the fact that we get them a quick consult. It's about the fact that we embrace them. I cannot overemphasize that any individual that comes into Phoebe that is gone through fertility or is pregnant is going to experience a wide range of challenges. And for some people, they're going to be life-threatening, life-altering. And for other people, they might be more discomforts, right, that maybe multiply over time. But that's why it's so important to have a space that's looking at the whole picture. Because
Yeah.
if I sort of say, what are the two factors that make the biggest difference in someone's ability to stay in the workplace? It's feeling supported when I went through this massive life change, and then contextually reintegrating that with my employer. And so we can only do so much at Phoebe, but if we can work with the employer, then when women feel supported and cared for going through the hardest, biggest change in their lives, that generates an incredible amount of goodwill.
Yeah. And loyalty.
I'd
I
be a
think,
Credit Suisse today. I'd be a Credit Suisse today if,
if,
I had somebody that understood that I was vomiting 4 times in the morning before I got to work, that I would have to be on an IV every weekend getting 3 liters of fluid. And if I had somebody at the company and privately that said, we see your future, and in 1 year this will be over, and
man,
you will come back and you will be incredible, but we're going to help you get through this time.
and they never did that.
No.
Luckily for the world, we now have Phoebe. And I think, what you shared earlier, it just sort of dawned on me when you were talking about growing up on a dairy farm, growing tomatoes. It's all makes sense. It's like, as businesses, we nurture and we grow people.
Yep.
That's the crop. And we can either use it to help, or we can just let things leave. I mean, I'm in the camp of like, well, if you've worked that hard to grow it, if you want to reap the benefit of the harvest, why let it go? So I love this story
Just a
it's
season,
awesome.
right? It's a
It's so
season.
cool what you're doing. I'm really, really encouraged by what you're doing. I want to just encourage you to just keep it going along. For those that are tuning in, how can they support you? How can they follow your work? Maybe give a little bit of a commercial plug on how they can follow Phoebe and the journey.
Well, I will be honest, we're not social media gurus, Phoebe, and you've seen that. I will, as a farmer leading a business, I'm very focused on the crop and the outcomes. And so I think the best way to follow us would be just simply to reach out and say, I saw what you did. I answer every single email. It's Emily@hiphoebe.com. Reach out, and we would
Yeah.
love to speak with your organization about the difference we can make. But we are, we're growers, we're nurturers, we're not marketers. Maybe we'll get better at that one day, but right now we're really just focused on the companies and the people.
Well, look, you're telling the story now, so it all starts somewhere. So for those that have tuned in to our community, to our those that are passionate about making an impact and a difference, would you mind sharing this on your social media? Would you mind commenting? Would you mind liking? And even just giving us feedback. That makes all the difference in the world. So Emily, it's been great to have you on, and I'm looking forward to continuing to chat with you and I guess learn more as you're on this journey. And if there's any one ask that you would have, I'm just sort of curious before we sign off here, one ask from our community, what would it be?
You should have told me this in advance. If I had one ask, I think I would
Mhm.
just I'd love to know more about what it was that got somebody through as we're developing Phoebe. If they just ping us and say, this got me through, or this person got me through, or this experience, because that's what I'm interested in. I'm really interested in the experiences of women as they become mothers and what really made the difference. Was it a lactation consult, or was it that one person that just checked on you 3 times? Or was it the moment you realized, wow, I'm so much stronger than I ever thought I was, not because everything went my way, but because I went through something so hard and I created life, and I am part of something much bigger than myself. And I'd love to know that from people, because that's how we built Phoebe. We built it on people's stories telling us what made a difference for them. And it wasn't like a quick tool or a quick, it was always the ecosystem, the family. Maybe it was one doctor that really cared, right? But I'd love to know from people what it was for them.
Great. Well, everyone in the AHI community, you heard it. Make sure you ping Emily and let her know what was it that got you through. Yeah, I look forward to our next discussion.
Thank you so much, Michael, for having me here. I'm grateful. I've really benefited incredibly from our friendship and from all of your support and everything you're doing. And so thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.